Hi, everyone. Can you hear me here? Yeah, okay. So first of all, I'm going to talk about what you just said. It's a shared effort with Blair and Paul Harvey. And let's get on with it. Right. So first of all, we need to answer two questions. Why transport systems? Why do we want to focus on decarbonizing transport systems? And why digital twins are even helpful for that? So I'll try to convince you and let's see how it goes. So first of all, well, the first answer is probably the easiest. So in the UK, for example, transport system, they account for around 30% of all our emissions. So that's clearly an easy target to tackle. So if we manage to reduce the emission of that sector, well, we are doing well towards our net zero objectives. The second question is a bit more difficult to answer. So why specifically do we need digital twins in order to achieve these goals of the decarbonization? So transport systems are very complicated. We have heard throughout the days how systems are interconnected. Think about the grid, think about where we can put infrastructure, where the request for electricity is coming from. So there are a lot of aspects that need to be considered. So for example, you may decide to have some new infrastructure to support electrification of vehicles. What's going to be the impact on, for example, other uses of electricity? We are working closely with people at the Port of Dover, and they would like to support electrification for vessels, for example. Where do you charge the batteries? Do you do it in the UK or do you do it in France, where electricity is cheaper now? I don't know. What if the government is making an investment on our side, and then the market is just you get all the vessels charging somewhere else anyways? So you see that you start to need to consider all sorts of different scenarios that they are just not technical. So that's the main point. So we need to really work closely with policymakers, because these kind of investments, they take years and billions of pounds, and you can't just say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get it right. You need to at least try to assess what's the impact on multiple dimensions. So that's what we're going to do in this project, and it's called Transit. So it just started a few months back, and we would like really to tackle these fundamental challenges. So the idea is that we are not going to decarbonize these transport systems tomorrow. It's going to be a long process where there are going to be a lot of decision points during this process. So the idea of having digital twins is that we should be able to identify what's the risk our decision making, and also trying to assess the impacts on, as I said, multiple dimensions. For example, social acceptability as well. What if we push for something, but then the public is not really up to the adoption? So essentially, it's really this one: reduce uncertainty and try to do it as quickly as possible, because we are running out of time. Sorry. So what are the challenges at the moment specific to transport systems? Well, if you go out and talk to industry, everybody's telling you, well, we have our digital twin. We are already making good use of it. Is it? We saw a lot of instances of things that are, I don't know, fancy dashboards, data that comes in and gets stored in a closet and stays there forever. All sorts of, you can imagine the entire spectrum, from useful things to less useful things, or even wasteful things. So to give another example from our friends of Dover, of course, if you want to, for example, optimize the operation of your port, and then trying to understand what an electrification scenario may look like, it would make sense to try to know, for example, in advance when vessels are coming in the port. So you would expect that you have an up-to-date data source that you could use to try to do some predictions or things like that. Well, we discovered that at the moment, what they do is they just look outside the window and they look if they can visually identify a vessel, and then they plan according to that. So the reality is a bit different than what we read on the academic paper sometimes. So something that is also important. Okay, we have these kind of twins. Okay, let's call them twins, but they're siloed, so they don't talk to each other. So one of the challenges is that we want to support an approach that allows multiple twins to talk to each other. Okay, so that's the vision. So we would like to have multiple twins that are not just data processing tools, but they are processes as well, computational models that are informed from the live data that you get in. We want to have multiple twins at different levels of fidelity that they talk to each other in a sort of federation. So here you could imagine, for example, at the highest level of fidelity, we have the cars, the vessels, the network topology around the Port of Dover, and then the federated twin actually represents the entire Port of Dover. And here you could have something like the grid. What kind of grid do we need to have in order to support the rest of an electrified Port of Dover? So what we want to have as well is these things needs to be programmable, because we want people to be able to play with these twins. But at the same time, they need to be a bit easy to use. So you want something domain specific for twins and not C, like we have seen in the first keynote. And also we want the analysis that we manage to carry out over these kind of models to be rigorous. So are our predictions trustworthy, or can we use them in practice? So to wrap it up, what we are proposing, and that's a bit crazy, but it got funded. So we want to use Milner's bigraphs as the underlying computational model. So the idea is that we want to have something that is like this, graphical. So imagine of this kind of fancy cartoons that allow you to represent the topological and the connection between the entities of your system. But these cartoons are also alive, so we can specify the behavior and how they compute step by step when, for example, new data come in or new decisions are made. I'm not going into the details, but the idea is that you could have your configuration for the Port of Dover, and then events come in, and you can compute a state space representing the possible evolutions. And on top of that, you can do all sorts of verification. Typically, these transitions are probabilistic because we need to take into account that the data we have might be missing, might be out of order, there may be errors. And sometimes you just don't know. So you just want to be able to reason on top of that, right? Okay, so that's where we are. So what's next? Okay, we think it's a promising solution, but there are still a lot of open questions. So from the theoretical point of view, so how do you move from abstraction levels, for example, automatically? So we are at this very detailed level, like the graph I showed you before. That's not very scalable to analyze. You want to come up with some sort of population model, for example, but how do you do it in a rigorous and mechanic way? So how do we run these twins in an efficient way? So I never talked about that. So we don't want to add fuel to the fire. So we need to find ways for this kind of infrastructure to also be sustainable. And then we need to integrate with other things. I never mentioned AI, for example. How would you, for example, adapt your models in such a way that new behavior is learned from, I don't know, data coming in? And the role of ontologies, that's already part of industrial standards, but how do we adapt them for digital twinning? So that's it. I hope that I answered at least partially some of these questions. And please get in touch with me or the other co-authors. And yeah, we are Transit. We're going to be around for the next 5 years. Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions online, Blair?
No, we don't.
Anyone in the room?
No? Thank you very much. So I'm always interested with people who try and apply formal models to large-scale, complex, hierarchical scenarios, because usually formal models don't scale very well. But I think my question is a bit more fundamental. Is that, the grid is not that precise, right? Actually a probabilistic model of, around this time of year we expect this many vehicles, they're likely this amount full and this many will need charging. a simple, probabilistic model. Can you make the case for me why a formal model, please?
Absolutely. So we believe that the models we are using, they have to be probabilistic. So all the things that I showed you, we are going to associate some sorts of probabilities. And we are going to, for example, when we talk about these what-if scenarios, always talking about potential envelope of behaviors that you explore, like the fancy plots we have seen during the day. So scenario high, low, and because, yeah, you're never going to have an exact prediction, especially if you do long-term predictions. For the abstraction, I think if you put in probabilities, that actually allows you to move towards the more continuous kind of representation of your state space, and that's allowing more computationally efficient analysis techniques rather than the discrete that you would find in traditional formal verification approaches.